Alrighty. Ready to walk him out?
In a riding ring in Atlanta, 16-year-old Elle Wilson is doing what every teenager wants, fitting in and feeling strong.
And then 1, 2, 3, up and over.
For Elle, this isn't just a hobby, it's hard-won independence in a body and brain that have fought to recover. Elle was an energetic, sharp, fearless girl.
She had more energy and more intellectual prowess than any kid we knew at the time.
In 2013, 2 months before her 5th birthday, Elle collapsed on a Florida beach near her family's home.
Elle just went off to the left and then collapsed. And when she came up, we went running down to her. When she came up, her eyes were stuck on the side of her head. Her speech was garbled, and she couldn't walk.
At first, Mindy and Mike Wilson thought it was a concussion. In the hospital, they were told something even worse.
The first diagnosis was a glioblastoma. The doctor came in and said, that it was a glioblastoma, and she was so sorry.
But then, one voice in a room filled with oncologists challenged the diagnosis, and the Wilsons grabbed onto the possibility that it wasn't cancer.
There was one doctor in the back of the room, and he said, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure that this is a cancerous tumor.
A second MRI confirmed that doctor's hunch: cerebral cavernous malformation, often called CCMs.
Good news is that your daughter's going to live. It says the bad news is that she has something that she'll have to deal with for the rest of her life, and it's going to be a complication.
We were so happy, and we were celebrating brain surgery, and we had no idea what was ahead. We really thought you could go in and fix it, and then she'd be fine. And we also thought that any doctor could do it. Any old neurosurgeon could do it.
Cavernous malformations are blood vessel malformations that are tangles, if you will, of abnormal blood vessels that are neither arteries nor veins. They are fairly large channels, hence the name cavernous, like a cave. And the blood flow through these malformations is under very low pressure and very slow flow.
The malformations can sit quietly for years or bleed without warning.
All right, you can go ahead and walk on. Nice job.
Elle has the most severe familial form, CCM3, meaning her genes predispose her to develop multiple lesions over a lifetime. Because of the rare location of Elle's malformation and the risk of it rupturing again with potentially devastating consequences, the Wilsons launched a nationwide search for a neurosurgeon with both the expertise and the courage to operate on their daughter.
Research suggested there were only 3 or 4 brain surgeons in the country that would work in this part of the brain. And there was a gentleman in Boston, a gentleman out west, and then Dan Barrow in Atlanta.
They also said he had the most gifted hands in America. They said what you need, because it is so deep in there, a successful surgery is not a given.
I'm now looking at the MRI that was done on Elle prior to her surgery that shows her cavernous malformation. So what she had would be what's called a hemorrhagic stroke. She had a hemorrhage or bleeding into her brain. And not just into her brain, but into a critically important part of her brain called the brain stem, very specifically the pons of the brain stem. So this is a structure that's about the size of my thumb, through which everything your brain thinks and does passes through to get to your spinal cord, and everything your body experiences goes through the brainstem to get to the cerebrum and consciousness.
The malformation that bled in Elle's brainstem was an area surgeons once considered off limits.
I mean, during my training, that was just forbidden territory. Nobody even thought of or talked about operating on the brainstem. It's called a developmental venous anomaly.
The Wilsons talked to Dr. Dan Barrow, who is the head of neurosurgery at Emory University.
There were a relatively small number of us at that time that had a lot of experience with this.
So I said, what would you do if it were your daughter? And he said, that's exactly what I'm thinking about.
A few days later, Dr. Barrow told the Wilsons, bring Elle to Atlanta. Barrow and his team performed the surgery.
This is the postoperative MRI. So this is where the malformation was, and you can see that it's completely gone now. And the pressure is immediately
Dr. Barrow used pre-op MRI with image-guided navigation, registering the patient in 3D space so a tracked wand can be seen moving on the MRI in real time. That precision helped the team avoid functionally critical pathways and pinpoint the safest entry point on the brainstem, where the malformation and the hemorrhage came closest to the surface so they could reach it without causing harm.
You can see the malformation. I'm kind of gathering it up. And
almost 13 years later, Dr. Barrow shows us how he removed the malformation in Elle's brainstem.
That's part of the malformation there. It's very important to make sure that you remove every bit of it, because if any is left behind.
It's a different color.
It kind of looks like a mulberry. That's what most surgeons liken it to.
He was smiling like no one's business. I mean, he came out of that OR, I mean, like he had just won a marathon. He was so happy because he felt that he had got it all without, you know, a lot of damage.
We typically like to get an MRI every couple of years to see whether we're growing new ones, whether the ones that are there have expanded, whether there's any symptoms of bleeding.
At Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, neurologist Dr. Faiza Lahaji goes over Elle's latest MRI. Elle isn't showing symptoms, but one of the lesions has grown. For now, the only option is watchful waiting, tracking the lesion by tracking how Elle is doing.
Much like an aneurysm, think of having 10 or 12 aneurysms waiting to rupture in your brain. Any one of them can shut the lights out. She has 12.
And you said you're in, what grade did you say?
11.
11. And doing okay in school?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Today, Elle is a high school junior. There have been lasting effects: physical, cognitive, social, emotional.
I'm going to guess this was in...
Elle can be brilliant in some areas and struggle deeply in others.
She can remember anything in the world. She's got almost a photographic memory, but she can't do simple reasoning. That's because of the pressure that a lot of the existing ones are putting on different parts of the brain now.
For the Wilsons, it means a constant kind of vigilance, watching for subtle changes that could signal bleeding, while still trying to give their daughter a normal teenage life.
You're constantly watching her. I don't like leaving her alone for long. We are so happy for where she is right now. And she's not what she was, and she's not going to be what she could be, but she's so much more than she ought to be.
Another massive shift for the Wilson family: they never went home to Florida.
These electors then vote for president.
They stayed in Atlanta since 2013,
This system helps prevent problems like
close to Emory, close to Dr. Barrow, who they say saved their daughter's life and could be called to do it again.
With those tumors that she has that could go at any moment, they could go right now. She could have one going right now, and we could be right back where we were.
The Wilsons also founded the nonprofit Elle's Angels Atlanta to expedite a cure for the disease.
What we would love as a family.
Money raised goes to research and advanced surgical technologies.
Hello?
Elle's care now is a long game, monitoring the lesions that remain and seeing how Elle is doing.
I think she's done remarkably well. I mean, first and foremost, she has not had a recurrent hemorrhage. So the malformation I removed, I believe, has been removed completely. Her follow-up imaging studies show an abnormal vein that is oftentimes associated with cavernous malformations. And in fact, we have to go to great effort to avoid injuring that vein, because injury to that results in a devastating stroke. Because even though it's an abnormal and funny looking vein, it serves as the normal vein for the part of the brain within which it resides. So that's all that is remaining there. And the other malformations she has have not bled or caused any trouble. I think the important thing to understand is that
Dr. Barrow encourages Elle to keep having a full and active life.
ongoing activities are not going to increase the risk of a cavernous malformation bleeding. There isn't any activity we know of that does that.
Being a teenager is always hard.
She said to me just last week how she knows that she has to work harder than everybody else, that just getting to and from class, changing classes, watching her feet everywhere she goes. She said to me, she said, the kids can run. She said, I can't run, I'll fall.
For now, surgery is still the main option when a lesion bleeds in a dangerous place, but researchers are working towards something bigger, medical treatments that could stabilize or prevent these malformations, especially for genetic forms like CCM3.
I think that in the foreseeable future, we will have medical treatments and maybe other non-surgical treatments for cavernous malformations. Already, there are various drugs that have been developed for other reasons that have been repurposed and have been used in clinical trials, some of which have shown some early promise.
Yay! Until then, Elle keeps doing what she's always done, showing up, working harder than everyone else just to move through the world.
You know, she's in there. Who she was, her spirit, her humor, she's in there.
Walk on.
She's finding her way in a rhythm all her own.